Hello, my friends. Welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. I am going to be talking today about 20 French-Canadian books, and let me give you the background. So, my friend Jolene and I, Jolene from Bookworm Adventure Girl, did this project asking people to tell us what their favorite books of the 21st century written by Canadian authors are. And I will link the resulting video that we came up with, the top 67 Canadian books of the 21st century, down below. But there were 352 titles that were submitted. So these top 67 were just books that had 3 votes or more. So in order to make people aware of all of the other great books that were nominated, we're doing a series of videos on various topics. So in honor of Women in Translation Month, August, I decided to pick the French books that made the list. Some of these were nominated in French, some in English. If there were both editions nominated, we just combined the votes. In total, there were 20 French-Canadian books that were nominated. And of these, 12 are written by women. So they would all qualify for Women in Translation Month. Those that have been translated, not all of them have been translated. 4 of these books are only available in French so far. 3 of them are by authors from the Innu First Nation, and 2 of them are graphic novels. That's it for statistics. I am going to launch right into the books, starting with the 3 that got the most votes and in fact made our top 67 list. And The Birds Rain Down by Jocelyne Saucier. It's translated by Rhonda Mullins, and the French edition is Il pleuvait des oiseaux. This one got 7 votes, so it was tied with 3 other titles in 12th place in our list. Now, this was one of the books that was nominated by another booktuber, Elizabeth from Bouquins and Books. Two other books by her will also be in this list today. I will link her top 10 video down below. Saucier was born in New Brunswick in 1948. She now lives in Quebec. This is her 4th novel. It has won a number of prizes and been shortlisted, including being shortlisted for Canada Reads. And as I think it was Elizabeth who pointed out that of the books that made the top 67, many of them have medals on the cover. And it was either from Canada Reads or Governor General Awards or things like that, that this was a way that people were made aware of Canadian books. And talking about them on BookTube is another way to make you all aware of them. So this novel is about some octogenarians living in a remote place in northern Ontario, and a photographer who goes there seeking out one man in particular who was a survivor of this great forest fire from northern Ontario that was back in the 1920s. There was a film adaptation of it, directed by Louise Archambault. It's a book that's only about 160 pages long. It's totally charming. And if you're looking for something for Shorty September, or even for Framed in September, because it's got the photography and there's a painting connection as well, you could read this for both BookTube events. And next is the novel Ouriou by Kim Thuy. This won Canada Reads in 2015. It was translated by Sheila Fischman, and it is written in vignettes. So it's another shorty, 144 pages. So again, for Shorty September, it is based on the author's own life. It is a novel, but it's about a girl who was born in Vietnam, fled with her family to a refugee camp in Malaysia, and then eventually when she was 10, she and her family moved to Montreal, or Quebec anyway, and she grows up, has a couple of sons, one of whom is autistic. The best way to give you an idea of Kim Thuy's style is to read you a teeny tiny bit, so that's what I'm going to do. And this is from the very first page. I came into the world during the Tet Offensive, in the early days of the Year of the Monkey, when the long chains of firecrackers draped in front of houses exploding polyphonically along with the sound of machine guns. I first saw the light of day in Saigon, where firecrackers, fragmented into 1,000 shreds, colored the ground red like the petals of cherry blossoms or like the blood of the 2 million soldiers deployed and scattered throughout the villages and cities of a Vietnam that had been ripped in two. I was born in the shadow of skies adorned with fireworks, decorated with garlands of light, shot through with rockets and missiles. The purpose of my birth was to replace lives that had been lost. My life's duty was to prolong that of my mother. That book got 4 votes in the project that we did, so it was tied for 15th place. Next is one that got 3 votes, so it was tied for 16th place. In English, the title is Suzanne. It's by Anaïs Barbeau-Lavalette, and it was translated by Rhonda Mullins. The French title is La Femme fuit. Now this is based on the author's own story of her maternal grandmother, Suzanne Meloche, who was a poet and a painter. And this woman left her family, abandoned her family when the author's mother was still a child. In the novel, the child is 3 years old. And so the author actually did hire a private investigator to look into the circumstances of her grandmother's life. And then she wrote this in second person, addressing her absent grandmother. And it does cover 85 years of this woman's life, actually possibly even longer. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've read it, but I remember really liking it. And it was shortlisted for Canada Reads, and I know that it was chosen by another booktuber, Jenny Johnston, because she did a video of her top 10 picks, and I'm going to link that down below. Editing Lindy here to add that Rebecca of Canada Reads American Style also chose Suzanne as one of her top 10 picks. So the link is below. All of the rest of the books that I'm going to be telling you about received 1 vote, and they are all worth looking at. These next 3 are all by Innu authors, starting with Kukum by Michel Jean. It's the same title in French. The author is from Mashtéoats, and like Suzanne, which I forgot to hold up when I was talking about it earlier, it is based on the author's own grandmother, who married an Innu man and then lived a nomadic life. So it's illustrated with photos from the author's family, so it really has the flavor of biography and memoir. Here's an example and another. Over time, the effects of logging and residential schools had a big effect on the family, and so you really see that in this novel. I haven't read it yet, but I do plan to. And I want to mention that the epigraph is by Joséphine Bacon. She writes, "I don't always remember where I come from. In my sleep, my dreams remind me of who I am. My origins will never leave me." And, oh, there's even a map here talking about this part of the land called Nitassinan, which means our land in the Innu language. This next book is by Joséphine Bacon, or Bacon, A Tea dans la Tundra. It's a collection of poetry, has not been translated into English. Bacon was born in 1947 in Passamit. She's well known as a poet in Quebec, and I think she's also a filmmaker. I know there was a documentary made about her life. Yeah. And this next book is also a collection of poetry, only available in French. It's called Enfants, lichen. It's by Maya Cousineau Mollen, who was born in 1975 in Iqaluit, and this collection received a Governor General Award for French language poetry. Next is a work of nonfiction that is only available in French so far. It's called Les Superbes, une enquête sur le succès et les femmes, and it's by Léa Clermont-Dion and Marie-Hélène Poitras. And I would translate this to English as Remarkable Women, an Investigation into Success. So it's nonfiction that celebrates but also investigates the effects of power or prestige on a woman. So how does it affect women? The women themselves, both in their working or public life as well as in their private life, and also how does it affect larger society? One of the authors of that book also wrote this novel, the next book on the list, Griffintown. It's by Marie-Hélène Poitras, and I think it's the same title in French. It's about calèche drivers in Old Montreal. Those are the carriage drivers, and it's described as a sort of spaghetti western, complete with murder. I read the first chapter and I was quite engaged right from the beginning. There's a young woman who wants to work with horses, and so she enters this world. It's only 160 pages, so another possibility for Shorty September. And I forgot to mention it's translated by Sheila Fischman. Next is a book that was only available in French until this very minute, practically. The book is supposed to come out September 3rd, but I got a copy of it yesterday at the bookstore. So I'm filming this at the end of August. The English title is May Our Joy Endure. It's by Kevin Lambert, translated by Donald Winkler, and the French title is Que notre joie demeure. This is about an architect, internationally known, and she has a mega project in Montreal, and she's pretty excited about coming back to her home city to build this huge complex. And it turns out that there is a lot of opposition to it. So I'm really interested in the topic of gentrification, and I have read another book by Kevin Lambert called You Will Love What You Have Killed, which is end of the world surrealism in the voice of a gay boy. He's growing up in Chicoutimi, Quebec, and Val d'Histoire, that's his name. He's already jaded by the time he's in grade 2, and he's lamenting that working people are expected to just survive in the sense of keeping their head above water, and the water itself is murky and toxic. And he's sure that there's got to be more to life than that. And shouldn't we have a right to thrive? And there are ghosts, there are, I don't know, it's kind of about blowing up the status quo. So I expect that there's going to be some excitement in here. I know that it goes back and forth in viewpoints. I expect a wild ride. Next is The Return by Dany Laferrière. It was translated by David Homel. The French title is L'énigme du retour, and this was published outside of Canada in English as The Enigma of the Return. It's won multiple awards. I haven't read it, but I get the sense that it is quite autobiographical because the central character is named Dany, and he's got a Haitian father who dies, and he wants to take his spirit back to Haiti to return him to the land of his father, to the land of his birth. It sounds really good. Next, I have 2 books by Catherine Leroux, The Party Wall and Madame Victoria. So first, The Party Wall. In French, this is Le Mur Mitoyen. Both books were translated by Laser Liederhändler. This is interconnected short stories. I read the first 3 and I was immediately hooked. So another one that I really want to get to. And Madame Victoria was inspired by a true event, or I think this was a true event. In any case, a body was found near the Victoria Hospital, and it was a corpse that was 2 years old, dressed in hospital clothes, and they were not able to identify this woman. And so what Catherine Leroux has done is imagine 12 different scenarios, 12 different lives for this woman and how it is that she ended up there. This sounds good too. The only book that I have read by Catherine Leroux is one that won this year's Canada Read. So it's called The Future, and it's set in a dystopian alternate future of Detroit, in a case where it remained in the hands of the French. And I liked it but didn't love it. But both of these sound better to me, so I don't know. I don't know if I'll read both, but I'm definitely going to read The Party Wall. Next is Nikolsky by Nicolas Dickner. Same title in French. This one is translated by Laser Liederhändler as well. And this was also a winner of Canada Reads back in 2010. It's described as 3 interconnected storylines and kind of a wild ride, quite funny. It won a Governor General Award for the translation into English. One of many books I have yet to get to. Next is Hunting Houses by Fanny Britt, translated by Suzanne Ouriou. I'm familiar with Fanny Britt as an author of books for young people, children and young adults, and she's also quite well known as a playwright. So this novel is about a realtor who accidentally meets up with an old flame, and I guess there's a question about whether she is going to throw away her current marriage and family life. I'm not sure, have not read it. I see that on the back here, there's a blurb from Catherine Leroux. She says, Fanny Britt has a unique gift for revealing the lining of the everyday and showing how complex and explosive and profound it can be. Her prose is sleek, her humor sharp, and her voice fueled by kindness rooted in truth. Well, that sounds like a good description, actually. Oh, so many books to get to. Next is one that I have read. This is Jerusalem, Chronicles from the Holy City, and it's by Guy Delisle, translated by Helga Dasher. This is a graphic memoir based on a year that he and his wife and young children spent in Jerusalem. It's very slice of life with gentle humor, but there are certainly darker issues. This is another one of the books that Elizabeth of Bookland Press had listed in her top 10 Canadian books. If you want to get a feel for what life might have been like, I don't know, about 10 years ago in Jerusalem, I think this will really satisfy your curiosity. Next up is another graphic novel, The Song of Roland by Michel Rabagliati. Rabagliati has written a whole series based on his own life. He covers childhood, adolescence, right up through his working life and marriage and into his older years. But he uses an alter ego. So it's not exactly himself in the stories, even though it's based on his own experiences. So Paul is his alter ego. And in Song of Roland, this one is about his father-in-law, Roland. There was a film version made of it. This book won numerous awards, including, I think it was the Audience Award at Angoulême. I haven't read this one, but I've read a number of his other books, and I really like them. His style is very clean line, expressive. He's described as writing the Tintin of Quebec. But they're not so much adventure, they're just very much slice of life and really capturing moments in time and place. Gentle humor. I highly recommend his work. Next is a great big fat book, Songs for the Cold of Heart by Eric Dupont, and it's translated by Peter McCambridge. The French title is La Fiancée Américaine, and the title in the US is The American Fiancée. Two different friends of mine, Penny and Laura, have both compared it to the style of John Irving. It's summarized as a big fat whopper of a tall tale that bounces around from provincial Rivière-du-Loup in 1919 to Nagasaki, 1990s Berlin, Rome, and beyond. This is a novel of a century-long, glorious, stuffed full of parallels, repeating motifs, and unforgettable characters, with the passion and plotting of a modern-day Tosca. And I think opera comes up a lot in it. Next is another, a big fat one, for sure, by France Daigle. The French title is Pour sûr, and this was the third book that was on Elizabeth of Bouquins and Books' top 10 books. It is set in Moncton, New Brunswick, and it's part of a series, I think the final installment of 4 or 5 books. And the style is quite unique. It's written in fragments with a note next to each section, and then it's like an index at the back. The French edition won a Governor General's Award, and it is written in Acadian French, which Elizabeth talks about in her video about this book. My experience with Acadian French is that I went to a French school in northeastern Alberta, and many of our teachers actually came from New Brunswick, so I became quite used to that particular accent. And when I was in Canada World Youth back in the 70s, there was Roger from Montreal and Anne from Moncton, New Brunswick, and Roland from Northern Ontario, and then myself, a Francophone from Alberta. So 4 of us, all with different versions of French. And 3 of us could understand each other easily, but Roger from Montreal could not understand Anne, and so I was always translating from one French to another for him, because he also was very poor in English. I think in the same way that if you grow up hearing a lot of different English accents, different ways of speaking English, you just become used to that. So that was the same for me, understanding French spoken in different ways. And when I was working on farms in France, I was in the department called La Creuse, which is right in the center. And the farm was actually a wildflower farm where they grew wildflower for seed. And the couple, Colette and Jacques, came from elsewhere. So Jacques came from Sable-d'Olonne in the west, and Colette was from Saint-Étienne in the east. And so even though they'd lived there for, 15 years, they were still considered outsiders. Anyway, I was looking after the farm while they were both away, and while doing that, a nearby farmer's cows got out, and so I got them back into a pasture. I grew up on a farm with cows, and I like working with cattle. And then I knocked on his door to let him know where I had penned them up. And then later, when I told Colette and Jacques what had happened, they said, "You could understand him?" And yeah, I had no trouble understanding him. In fact, he spoke a version of French that was very like what the farmers around St. Paul spoke, so my home community. So that was kind of interesting. I met a woman from France who was in Alberta specifically to study the French as it was spoken in some of the remote French communities in Alberta, because it's so closely related to dialects that are no longer spoken or rarely spoken in parts of France. So, sorry, I've gone off onto a whole tangent. I might just cut this out. I was talking about For Sure, which is described as a Rubik's Cube of a novel that explores the connection with language, place, and culture. And next is another big fat book, The Dishwasher by Stéphane Leroux, and it's translated by Pablo Strauss. The French title is Le Plongeur. This one is 405 pages in the English edition and 576 pages in the French edition. French takes more space on the page to say the same thing, by the way. The novel is described as hyper-realism, and it's about a graphic design student who has a gambling problem, and he is supposed to be creating the cover for an album for a heavy metal band. I think this is set in Montreal in 2002. And anyway, he takes a job as a dishwasher at a high-end restaurant. That's all I know about it. I'm at the last book. This is only available in French. It's Reine de Mémoire, and it's by Elisabeth von Arburg. This is actually a fantasy saga series. I think it's 5 books. And the first one is La Maison d'Oubli. And that book is 688 pages. So a great big fat fantasy series, which I have not read. It's based on an alternate world, something like this one, with magic throughout. And in this alternate universe, Jesus had a twin sister, and I think there are 3 orphans who have this map that can transport them to other places. I think we go back to France in the 18th century. That's about all I know about this. I have read other books by von Arburg. I really liked her science fiction series, the Maryland Chronicles, in French. That was Chronique du Pays du Mer. That's from the 90s, I think, and a multi-award winning. So feminist science fiction. Von Arburg was born in France in 1947. She emigrated to Canada in the 70s, and I think she's lived in Chicoutimi for decades. She is quite well known as a translator also, mostly of speculative fiction, and her work has been translated into many languages. So I don't know why Reine de Mémoire hasn't been yet, but perhaps it will be. It was I think it's from the early 2000s, so it's been a while. And speaking of taking a while, this video has gotten a bit longer than I expected. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that I have piqued your interest in French Canadian books, and maybe you want to read something on this list. Please let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if you've read any of these. And thanks again for watching. I will see you all soon. Bye for now.